His hand struck me across the kitchen table, soup spilling down my shirt as he sneered like a king in his castle, while I, his father, bruised and trembling, swore in silence that this humiliation would not be the end of my story. Before I continue, subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're listening. If this story resonates with you, please share it. The more people know, the fewer grandparents will have to pay for someone else's trust. The first thing I tasted was metal. Not the salt I forgot, not the celery or onion, nettle. The tang of it slid across my tongue when my teeth knocked together. The spoon clanged to the edge of the pot shook, and the bowl slipped from my hand and met the tile with a break that sounded like a snapped bone. I heard the ceramic explode and skitter, little white pieces jumping in every direction. Hot broth kissed my shins and then cooled fast, running down into the grout lines, carrying carrot coins and pale noodles like stranded confetti. "Unbelievable," my son said. The word dropped on me like a lid. "What is this? You can't even get soup right?" My knee hit the floor slower than my pride. I reached for the counter, and the counter moved away, like the kitchen had learned a new trick. My palm found tile, sticky with broth. I could smell the chicken stock. I could hear the refrigerator humming, a low, tired sound, and the TV out in the living room working through a commercial about a new sedan with a payment plan. The second thing I noticed was the quiet. The quiet between his words. The quiet inside my own head where I used to hear my wife saying, "Taste it before you serve it, Eddie. Just dip the spoon and taste." I had meant to. The salt was there, in the cabinet, second shelf, behind the old pepper grinder with the cap that doesn't sit straight. My wife's recipe notebook sat next to it, the cloth cover faded to the color of the sky over a parking lot. She wrote soup in neat cursive on a yellowed page. The word soup. The word simple. It didn't feel simple now. "Are you going to just sit there?" my son said. He was wearing the boots he calls work boots, stiff soles, big enough to announce him. He smelled like fabric softener and something sharp underneath, like a lemon-scented cleaner that never quite masks its own bitterness. He wasn't one of those men who wet soft by accident. He chose it. He chose edges. He kept his hair cut so close the scalp showed pink along the top, and his jaw had the same notch mine does, but on him it looked like something to use. "I forgot the salt," I said. The words came out small and soft. The kitchen heard them and then buried them. He shook his head like that was a sentence. A small laugh, tight, almost for himself. He took a step, and the heel of his boot found a shard of the bowl and cracked it into smaller parts. My hands went to the floor, fingers spread, trying to gather heat and porcelain. One fingertip found a triangle of ceramic and gave up a thin cut, a quiet burn that followed the line of the shard. I pressed my finger to my palm and saw one drop of blood, so red it didn't look like mine. The soup around it turned a ghostly pink for a second and then went back to being soup. "Don't bleed on the floor," my daughter-in-law said from the doorway. She didn't raise her voice. She never does in the beginning. She coasted in on perfume and calculation, all clean lines and a phone already in her hand. Her nails were the color of old wine. She had her sweater tossed over her shoulders, careful like it was placed there by a stylist. She has a way of moving that makes rooms obey. She comes in and lamps look brighter, or at least they act like they are. She wore her hair up in a way that made you think she had a meeting, even if she was just going to the mailbox. Her phone lit her face in cold blue. I could see the little numbers on the top corner, battery full. Mine never is. Mine lives in a kitchen drawer most of the time, plugged in, forgotten.
"I said no takeout tonight," my son went on, like we were in the middle of an old conversation. I said, "We're saving." "I can fix it," I said. My voice tripped on the last word. "I'll fix it." "You can't fix being careless," he said. And then the side of his hand found my shoulder. Not a blow meant to knock me down, not a punch, just something sharp and fast and meant to make a point. My body did the rest. There are muscles that remember how to fall. I felt the cabinet at my back, the open dishwasher edge kiss my hip, the broom handle slide out and go clattering under the table like a loose snake. The sound made the house flinch. I saw, for half a second, my wife's reflection in the oven door, not because she was there, but because my face in that glass still looks for her. The oven showed me a man on the floor, holding himself up like the way a dog does when it wants to believe it's not old. Emily's sneakers appeared at the edge of my vision, quiet, white soles with pen marks where she draws little stars on them. She was in the hallway a moment ago with her earbuds in, the wire slung across her shoulder. She always knows where to stand to stay on the right side of an adult's bad mood. She knows it from practice. 14 years old and trained like a cat to find the warm square of sun and not make it disappear. She slid a towel into my hand without anyone but me noticing. It smelled like laundry and kitchen. She didn't say a word. She's good at not saying. I put the towel under my hand to block the soup, to give my skin something to hold. My son sighed, deep enough to make a statement without words. He took the pot from the stove and set it in the sink hard. The metal rang the porcelain and the pot settled with a cough. He turned the faucet and let water blast into it, steam rushing out like a small storm, fogging the window over the sink in an instant. "Next time," he said, and left the "next time" hanging there like a hook. "I'll call in," my daughter-in-law said to her phone, fingers moving. "We'll be 10 minutes late." She looked up at me and let her eyes travel my face the way you check if a fruit is ripe. "There's still ice packs in the freezer if you need. Remember the doctor said not to let swelling sit." I said nothing about doctors. I don't correct her anymore. Not when she says "the doctor," like there is one doctor who belongs to all of us and he speaks through her. The last time I tried to bring my little folder to a visit, she took it out of my hands in the waiting room and called it cute. "It'll be okay," Emily mouthed. She shapes her lips in a quiet way that is just for me. It's a language we built out of necessity. I nodded again, because nodding looks like an answer. I pushed myself up to sitting, then standing, the way you climb a ladder slowly, and the kitchen returned to its regular size. The clock on the stove clicked to the next minute with its cheap plastic sound. The light over the sink hums if you listen too hard. All the noises of a house doing its job. I went to the cabinet and reached for the salt, the little box with the girl and the umbrella, damp from years of being near the stove. My fingers found the cardboard and then the notebook beside it. The cloth cover smiled at me with its stains and its softness. My wife's handwriting rests inside like a voice that never dated. On the soup page she wrote, "Taste, then salt," and drew a little arrow toward the margin where she noted, "If you use store broth, it's more salty. Be gentle." I set the notebook on top of the fridge. It lives there now, out of reach of splashes and out of sight unless I want it. It still looks like her when I see it, even if it can't be, even if what I see is just the idea of her, the way she would stand with her hip against the counter, one leg crossed over the other, a spoon in her hand like a baton. She would look at me and narrow her eyes and say, "Taste it, Eddie. Don't guess."
I poured a pinch of salt into my hand and then into the pot, even though the pot was now a bright metal bowl of water and regret. The salt disappeared with dignity. Out in the living room, the sports channel changed to something about the market. My son likes to keep numbers moving in the corner of his eye. He likes to say things like "asset class" and "write it out" when his friends come by. I used to understand other kinds of numbers, measurements for tables, distances between studs, the length the board would grow if you brought it in from the cold and let it rest.
Those numbers obeyed you if you respected them. These numbers on the TV always look like they're ready to bite. Dad, my daughter-in-law called from the hallway, we put your debit in the family wallet, remember? If you order anything, use the app and choose that card. Don't try the old one. It's not active. She made her voice sweet like a new jar of jam. It's just easier that way. Easier for who sat under my tongue, but I didn't say it. I wiped the counter, gathered the shards, and stacked them on a plate like tiny sails. I set the plate on the far end of the counter where no one puts their elbows. I unfolded a trash bag and the plastic hissed and sighed as it opened, a sound as domestic as any lullaby. She came into the kitchen, light steps, and opened the drawer where my mail lives now. The drawer used to hold pot holders and wooden spoons. Now it holds envelopes addressed to me and also labels written in her hand. Budget, household, utilities, HSA. She likes labels. She says they keep things clean. She pulled out a white envelope with the window and tucked it under a stack without looking at the name. I'll handle these tomorrow, she said, like she does every day. Can I see? I asked, and immediately wished I hadn't asked. It's just routine, she said, and smiled at the sink. We have it all on autopay. Remember how your cable used to get cut because you forgot? This is better. She said we, but it meant she. Sometimes when she says we, she means the house, like the house and her are one being, and I am a guest who should take off his shoes. I bent to pick up a stubborn piece under the lip of the dishwasher. The floor made its complaint in my knee. The small pain was clear and honest, the way pains used to be when you did a day's work and then sat down and felt them spin down. Grandpa, Emily said softly right behind me. She had a little bandage between two fingers, the kind with cartoon characters printed on it. She held it out. For your finger, she said, finally letting sound into the air. I let her stick it on me. The adhesive caught the tiny hairs on my skin, and the relief of being tended by a child made me want to sit right there on the floor and reconsider my life. She smoothed the edges with a flat touch and then patted once like she'd finished a painting. On her wrist, a hair tie waited like a halo. Thank you, I said. She smiled with her mouth closed. She has her mother's dimples when she does that, but not the same hardness behind the eyes. There is room in Emily's eyes for me to stand in. Salt is okay sometimes, she whispered, which is her way of sharing a rebellion. It is tonight, I said. It wasn't a joke, but she laughed and it became one. My son reappeared, half turned toward the living room. What's the holdup? We're hungry. I spilled, I said. You were careless, he said, because careless changes the air. Careless means it was me, not it. Just get a pizza, he told his wife, and then to me, like it was a kindness. We'll use your card. She was already on the app. The phone lit her nails. Done, she said. Thank you, she tossed in my direction without looking up. You learn to live inside small insults. They are room temperature. They fill the house like air. You don't notice them until you go outside.
I put water to boil for more noodles, even though no one asked. I sliced a carrot thin, the knife making a rhythm on the board rocking because one leg of the old table has been a hair shorter since 1998. My wife used to fold a matchbook under it when company came. There are 3 matchbooks in the junk drawer that say Italian restaurant, and one from a hotel we couldn't afford. I keep them like awards. Dad, thermostat is at 72, my son said, passing his hand under the vent like a man checking for rain. We talked about this. It's too expensive. We're not made of money. He clicked it down with 2 firm taps that said he was solving something. My hands get cold, I said to the counter. Wear a sweater, my daughter-in-law said. You have 3. She knows the number of my sweaters the way you know the number of knives in your block. She moved through the kitchen and wiped a spot I already wiped, and then put the dish rag in the laundry machine so she could start a small load that felt accomplished. The washer bumped and sang behind the pantry door. The house smelled like soap and chicken and a tire store. I took the trash bag out to the can by the back door. The evening air pushed into my lungs and spread out like relief. The sky was the color of cold metal. Somewhere down the block a dog barked at nothing and then decided it had made its point. When I came back in, my son had the news on the TV, and the anchor's mouth was forming shapes I didn't want to hear. There was a headline crawling across the bottom talking about numbers and war, but for me, the war was here, between the sink and the stove, between what I used to be able to do and what I am allowed to do. I wiped the stove again. I always do one last wipe. It's a habit that makes me feel like the day has been sealed. The pizza came. The box said a name I couldn't pronounce. They took slices the way people do who have never worried about something as small as salt, and ate standing at the counter like we were in a station. A slice was left for me on a paper plate with grease spots forming perfect circles. I ate it standing up too because my legs would have felt strange sitting down while everyone else stood. Emily took 2 napkins and chose to sit on the step into the living room, her plate on her knees. She looked at me between bites and then down again, mastering the art of being present without being caught. After, my son dropped the empty box into the recycling bin and left the lid open. He went to the couch and spread his arms as if claiming land. My daughter-in-law brought him a beer from the fridge, which they say I shouldn't drink because of my medications, and handed it to him with the old smile I remember from high school pictures. My son was handsome when he was 15. Everyone said so. He could charm a teacher into thinking he didn't need to turn in homework that didn't interest him. He was good at bending attention. He thought it was a skill, not a borrowed thing that runs out. "Dad," she said, turning back to me, "don't forget the appointment Thursday. I'll go with you." "For what?" I asked. "I like to hear them say it." "To adjust your prescription. You've been forgetful," she said. "Like a nurse. Like a wife to a man older than me." She glanced at Emily then, like she was checking if that statement had an audience. "I forgot salt," I said. She smiled kindly, the way a person smiles at a dog that's too close to the road. "And the rent 3 months ago," she added. Soft voice, soft eyes, sharp content. That piece of history sits in her pocket all day, ready to be taken out when she needs to remind me, or herself, that I am lucky to have help. I remember that day, too. I remember the checkbook light in my hand, the numbers blurring, the little window on the envelope being just on the wrong side. I remember thinking I should tell my wife, and then remembering again that she would not answer.
My eyes went to the top of the refrigerator. The cloth cover waited there with its little snag at the edge. Emily followed my look and then looked away, respectful. "Time to rinse the plates," my son said, without looking at me, like I might forget what plates are and why they get washed. "And that drain is slow again. Use the snake." I emptied the plates and ran the water hot, the faucet spitting before it smoothed out. The hot water on my hands made my skin feel new again, raw and clean at the same time. I rolled up my sleeves and found the sink snake under the cabinet, the coil cold, the metal smooth in a way that makes you feel like a tool is also a promise. I fed it slowly into the drain, wary of the angle. It found resistance and then moved through it, a quiet give, the kind of success I am allowed. When I pulled it back, it came up slick with whatever lives in drains. I rinsed, cleaned, sprayed, rested, did it again. When the water finally made the circle and disappeared, I let myself smile at the sound of the drain obeying gravity. I dried my hands on a towel, and the towel left tiny white hairs on my skin. "Grandpa," Emily said from the step, "can I have one of the green apples?" She shortened the word grandpa when she is happy. It comes out more like grandpa, like a Boston man might say it. She doesn't know that makes me think of the time we drove to the coast and ate clam chowder with crackers, and she put 3 on top like currency. "You can have 2, I said. She glowed in the quiet way. She came and stood next to me and watched me peel one, the knife making a ribbon of skin that fell into my hand in one long spiral. My wife used to applaud that. She'd call it a party trick. Emily held the bowl while I sliced the apple into it. The pieces fell with a soft clap, 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 clap. She took a piece and held it between 2 fingers and pressed it to my lips, and I took it because when a child offers you food, you are borrowing the body of their trust. "Thank you," I said. She shrugged, but she was pleased. "Emily," my daughter-in-law called. "Homework!" It was a command with a friendly sweater on it. "Okay," Emily said and drifted toward her room. She touched the edge of the refrigerator as she passed it, fingertips a whisper along the door. She has a way of making goodbye to objects that feel like friends. The house settled into the evening like a man into his chair. The TV kept talking. The dryer thumped once and then stopped. The clock on the wall drew slow circles. I wiped the counters one more time and hung the towel over the oven handle straight. The little things you do to tell yourself you did 'em. My hip complained when I turned. I reached into the freezer for a gel pack and pressed it to the side of my face where my son's hand had made a point earlier. The cold pushed out tears I didn't plan to have. I let them sit on my skin and go cool. It's a private relief, those drops. They feel like you giving back to yourself something you thought you surrendered. I went to the hall, and the mailbox slot by the door with the little brass flap had coughed up 2 flyers and a white envelope I wanted to open. I held it in my hand and felt how thick it was. The paper inside had weight. Before I could find my glasses, my daughter-in-law's hand slipped in, fast and light, and took it. "I'll add it to the stack. You don't need to think about this stuff. You stress yourself. It's just Medicare, and they always say urgent, and it never is. I'll call." "I can read," I said. "Of course," she said, smiling. "We're a team, remember?" She placed her palm on my forearm long enough to leave a warm print, and then she was back to wherever she lives inside herself. My son turned up the volume. The announcer said something was breaking. I had already broken something today. The word had nothing left for me. I took the gel pack back to the kitchen. I put it on the counter next to the spot where the recipe notebook rests when I use it. I slid the notebook down from the top of the fridge and set it on the table. The cloth was worn smooth at the corners from the kind of handling that means love. I opened to the soup page and read it like I was reading a letter from my wife. She wrote, "Start with onion and celery in butter until sweet, then add carrot. Not too hot or it will be bitter." She underlined sweet and wrote, listen for the change in sound. She always said you can hear vegetables relax. She said they go from chatter to whisper when they're ready. If you ask me, that's the most useful thing anyone ever wrote in my house. I could hear my son's voice in the living room, a little louder now, and I could hear the radiator make its old clink like a coin hitting a jar. I could smell chicken and lemon and new paint. I could feel the table under my palms, the edge smooth where the varnish wore away from years of wrists and elbows. I could see, in the reflection on the window, the outline of my head, the bent shoulders, the man I know I am and the man they think I have become, and how those two men share a body and a name and not much else. I heard the elevator at the end of the hall. It made its little bell. Footsteps passed our door and then came back. The steps were not hurried. They were certain. The kind of walk a person has when they live in the building and know where the light switches are in the stairwell. The sound moved from carpet to wood in the vestibule, and the wood remembered how to creak a welcome. The doorbell rang. It's a cheap bell, the kind that sounds like a toy. It doesn't ding-dong like the old ones in houses with a foyer. This one buzzes, low and insistent, like a bee trapped behind glass. It rang once. It rang again. The second time, my son turned his head toward the door, but didn't get up. My daughter-in-law froze, listening, and then returned her face to a neutral setting that tells you she decided something. "Who is that?" my son said to the TV. The bell kept going, patient in its impatience. The sound slid under the door and across the floor and up my legs. "I'll get it," I said and stood. "Wait," my daughter-in-law said, but not to me. She said it to something inside her plan. I walked slowly through the living room, past the couch where my son held court, past Emily's backpack left open, with a spiral notebook visible, its first page a math problem that used apples and trains to hide what math really is. My hip made its complaints, but I told it to hush, just for a second. I touched the door with the palm of my hand and felt the vibration of the bell through the wood. It's a funny thing, feeling a sound as much as hearing it. I looked back once at the kitchen. The light over the table made a circle of brightness like a stage light, and in the middle of that circle sat the recipe notebook, open to my wife's voice. The gel pack sweated next to it. A drop of water made a perfect circle on the wood before it slid into the grain. The bell went off again. The knocking started, not loud, but deliberate. Knuckles with something to ask. I lifted the chain and left it hanging in place. I turned the deadbolt. The metal said a small no and then a small yes. I put my hand on the knob and felt how warm it was from the house's heat. Behind me, the TV described a storm in a different state. The radiator exhaled. The washing machine beeped that it was done. My son cleared his throat. My daughter-in-law put her phone down. Emily's door was open, and she stood there in the shadow, her hair in her eyes, the way children do when they want to be there without showing up entirely.
I cracked the door. The hall light flooded the entryway in hard yellow. The smell of someone's dinner drifted in, garlic and brown cheese. The footsteps that had paused now came back, closer. The knob in my hand turned a quarter-inch under my palm, just enough to tell me someone on the other side thought they could come in if they needed to, and the chain between us made a sound like a tiny scream. The bell buzzed again, and I stood there, eyes on the gap, knowing I had 1 second to choose between the door and the little book on the table that still smelled faintly of my wife. I chose the door, but I didn't let go of the book. I kept the chain in place and cracked the door just as far as the brass would allow. The hall light hit my face like a stage lamp. The smell of someone else's dinner rolled in. Garlic, brown cheese, a sweetness like bell peppers, and underneath it the downstairs laundry vent sending up warm detergent air, blue and chemical. The neighbor from 3B stood there with 2 grocery bags, biting into her fingers, and an extra carton of eggs tucked into the crook of her arm. She's the kind who doesn't wear shoes in the hallway. She stands there in socks, shifting from foot to foot like she can't help but dance to the building's humming. Her eyes did the whole tour in 1 second. The towel in my hand, the gel pack sweating on the table behind me, the soup stains on my pants, and the red, fresh dot on my bandaged finger showing through cartoon plastic. Her mouth made a small O. She didn't ask yet. People like her don't come at you head on. They check the weather first. "I heard a crash," she said. Light voice like you might use for a skittish animal. "Everything okay?" I told my face to be normal. "Dropping things," I said, as if that were a hobby. Behind me, the living room paused. The TV's drone kept going, but the room it lived in held its breath. My daughter-in-law stood up from the edge of the couch, where she'd been perched like a person in a commercial, and slid toward me quick, soft soles on wood. She always moves like she's cutting through water. She took the door with one hand, one fingertip braced on the chain, and rotated the other half of her body into the hall to block the view of me like I'm a stain on wallpaper. "Hi," she said to the neighbor, voice as bright as the hall light. "We're fine. Little kitchen mishap. You know how it is." The neighbor needed only that light to do her reading. She saw the makeup on my daughter-in-law's face. Perfect, except for the tiny tightness at the corners of the mouth that only happens when the script gets changed. She saw over the shoulder the soup streaks, and my hand hovering where a man's hand would hover when it wants to be useful but has been reminded it's clumsy. She saw the chain engaged, and she saw me not engaging it. She didn't move her eyes to my cheek, but I could feel her avoid it on purpose, which means she saw. "I brought eggs," she said with a small laugh. "They were on sale. I always buy too many." She lifted one bag and the plastic cut deeper into her fingers. They had grooves now, red lines like rules on a school paper. My daughter-in-law's smile deepened, like a curtain rising for Act 2. "So kind. We're all set. We did pizza." She angled her body another inch into the hallway, the move of a goalie. "Thank you for checking." I watched the neighbor's throat move. She wanted to say something else, you could see it. She settled for lifting one bag again and letting it drop an inch so the handles would hit different fingers. "Okay," she said, and her eyes slid back to me one more time as if to take a picture and file it. She took half a step away, then caught herself and turned back to set one of the eggs cartons on our doormat, the one with the faded stripes. "These are for you," she said. "They'll go bad if I keep them all." "We can't take those," my daughter-in-law said at the same time I said thank you. She reached for the carton with 2 fingers like it might stain and lifted it off our own mat and back into the safe zone of the hallway. "You keep them," she repeated. "We have plenty."
The neighbor let the moment sit on the floor. She looked at me again, and then, because she's a particular kind of brave, she sent her eyes over my daughter-in-law's shoulder and into the room, over the top of the chain, past the gel pack and the recipe notebook open on the table like a vulnerable thing. She made that little ooh again, and then it became a straight line. "Okay," she said for the second time, but softer. "Have a good night." "You too," my daughter-in-law sang, and closed the door with a gentle hand that still made the chain knock the wood, a little metal cough, before the latch engaged. The moment the door shut, she turned fast and inhaled, an intake of air like someone had told her to smell a flower. "You don't open the door without me," she said, not loud, but with the weight turned up. "We've talked about this." "I opened the chain," I said, hearing the foolishness of that sentence as I said it. "You don't know who it could be," she said, and her eyes flicked to the gel pack and then to my cheek and then away in an efficient circuit. "Please don't do that again." My son didn't turn his head. "Who cares?" he said to the living room. "It's the hall monitor." There was a thin thread of music playing from somewhere above us, a neighbor with a piano who only knows 3 minor chords. The radiator in our place took a breath just then and made one of those old, startled noises like it was trying to remember a song too. In here, the air felt thicker suddenly, a clammy indoor weather that sticks to your neck. I could feel the dried salt of soup on my shin pulling against the skin when I moved. The towel in my hand had cooled. "Back to it," my son said, and that was both an order and a benediction. I slid the chain back into place and moved to the kitchen as if the floor had laid a track for me. I could feel the neighbor in the hallway still, lingering, rearranging her bags, pretending to fuss with eggs. There is nothing more obvious than someone pretending the hallway doesn't matter. After another beat, I heard the elevator bell again and the soft suck of its doors. My daughter-in-law did her sweep. She straightened the dish rag, she pulled the garbage bag ties and double-knotted them like a sailor. She looked at the dish rack and moved one plate a half-inch farther from another so they wouldn't kiss and leave marks she hates. Her presence is an audit and a kind of insurance. There is relief in watching someone else do their idea of perfect. There is also an exhaustion to it, like being enrolled in a class you didn't sign up for. "I'll take this down," she said, lifting the trash bag with one hand and pressing it against her hip to balance the weight in a way you only learn if you carry children or groceries or the shape of a marriage. She stopped, looked at my hands, and then looked at the floor. "You missed that spot under the table." "I'll get it," I said. She paused, watching my body not move yet, and then nodded to dismiss me from this particular test. She moved toward the door and then turned back. "Oh, and the thermostat," she said, tapping the little white box on the wall with one finger like she was waking a sleeping thing. 70 is still too high. We talked about 70. 68 is fine. Put a sweater on." But she didn't wait to see if my sweater appeared. She took the bag and went down the hall, and I heard the building breathe her out. My son came to the kitchen threshold with a beer can that made a tiny hiss when he put it on the counter, leaving a wet ring like a brand. He looked at my face with a quick, clinical gaze, the kind I used to see on foremen I respected. They'd look at a beam and know if it would hold without tapping it. He wasn't checking if I would hold. He was checking if it would make a mess.
"Don't let it swell," he said. And then he reached past me for the dish towel I had straightened and tossed it onto the rotating magnet on the fridge door so it would dry in the proper wind. He knocked the recipe notebook with his wrist, and I reached out so fast you could see my hand remember youth. My fingers caught the cloth corner and pulled it back to the center of the table. He laughed a little at my reflex. "What is it with that thing?" he said, without waiting for an answer. I smoothed the corner like it had hair. The fabric felt warm. My wife used to do that exact smoothing motion when she read on the porch. It was a motion that meant home more than the house itself. Emily arrived without arriving, the way steam arrives. You only notice when you feel it. She stood close enough to the edge of the light to glow a little. Her face was open. Her eyes took everything in, but did not put it all down in the same place. She saw my hand on the notebook. She saw the beer ring. She saw the damp on my cheek where the gel pack had made me cry by surprise. She saw and she did what she always does. She made space where there wasn't any. "I can do recycling," she said, and reached for the bin with the cardboard and bottles and the pizza box folded in on itself like a collapsed tent. She pulled it from under the sink, and the plywood wall scraped a little because it's swollen near the bottom from a leak back in February. She leaned, slid, lifted, and her white-soled sneakers squealed on the tile in a small, childlike sound that made me ache. "Leave it," my son said, already back to his spot. "I'll do it after the game." He won't. He says he will. Emily didn't set it down. She glanced at me. That glance is our phone line. I made half a face that meant, "Careful," and she tilted her head like she heard the message. Then she did a small, sly thing. She set the bin next to my chair, not back under the sink, a place where I could reach it without bending, a place where it would get done without announcement. She looked at the recipe notebook as if it were a small animal, and then she took her hoodie pocket and brushed it against the edge of the table for something quiet, fell and ended up tucked under the cloth. She did it with a motion old pickpockets would applaud. The object made the soft clink of metal against wood, and then the sound died under the weight of the book. I didn't look. She took her hands out empty and stretched like a cat and wandered toward the hallway, where her room waits with its string lights and pencil shaving spells. I wanted to lift the cloth and check. I held still. The room held its breath a little more. My daughter-in-law returned, breeze back in, empty hands, clean face. The living room swallowed her. My son smiled at some joke on TV I couldn't hear. The applause track filled the house like static. The radiator breathed. The neighbor's piano played its 3 notes and quit. I lifted the cloth of the recipe book with 2 fingers. There was, underneath, tucked like a secret between 2 lives, a small key on a cheap ring. The ring had a plastic tag shaped like a green leaf with a white line through it, some store logo, worn smooth. The key was not ours. Our keys are old-fashioned brass with round heads. This was a little silver thing with teeth that looked machine-made yesterday. It felt cold through the cat of my thumb. Emily must have found it somewhere that wasn't meant for her. Emily knows where things go when adults think they're hiding them. She never brags about it. She just saves and waits. I let the cloth fall back over the key and slid the whole thing an inch toward the wall so it wouldn't be jostled. My heart made a noise I haven't heard since the night I asked my wife to marry me in a diner on Route 1, and the jukebox chose our song without us feeding it a dime.
"Dad," my daughter-in-law said from the doorway, voice wrapped in velvet. "Can you grab the package downstairs? They left a slip again, and it's just easier if one of us fetches it now before the office closes the locker." She already had my shoes in her hand, the ones with the thin soles that make the sidewalk feel like a confession. I took the shoes and sat to put them on. The laces remembered the shape of my fingers. The gel pack sweat on the table. The recipe book covered a secret. The house smelled like baked dough and lemon cleaner and the faint ghost of my wife's hand cream that only I remember. "I'll go," I said. I didn't need to, but I wanted a reason to walk, to burn the buzz out of my bones. The elevator is a little box that doesn't like heavy breathing. It closed on me with a sigh and carried me down 5 floors in the time it takes to regret things. The lobby is a different temperature than the rest of the building, cooler, like a hotel with hopes. The package locker clicked when I scanned the fob from the super's desk. Inside was a brown box that felt like it contained a book and the future. I signed the digital pad with a shaky finger, and the screen refused my first name and asked me to try again as if I weren't myself. When I turned to go back up, the neighbor from 3B was propping open the door to the laundry room with her elbow and one knee and sorting the machines with quiet authority. She looked up and her eyes said hello and also other words. "You good?" she asked, eyebrows lifting. "I'm fine," I lied. I have been practicing lying with a soft voice. "If you need anything," she said, and then she closed the sentence in the dryer. On the way back up, the elevator stopped on 4 and took in a man I've only seen at mail slots. He nodded at my face and looked away so fast it was a mercy. My cheek had stopped feeling cold an hour ago. Now it felt like it belonged to a different man I borrowed from. Back inside the apartment, the air had changed, like someone had been moving things they didn't admit to moving. The TV volume was down, which never happens without purpose. My son was not on the couch. My daughter-in-law stood near the bookshelf, reorganizing pictures in a way that meant the pictures had been used for a conversation. Emily was in the hallway, too still, looking at the office door, which should have been closed. The office door was open an inch. A thin blue light pulsed on the floor from the monitor, a small ocean spill. The air coming out of that room had a different smell, new plastic and dry dust and the warm, tinny tang of electronics. I kept walking like my route had always been office-bound. No one stopped me. Sometimes permission is just a straight back and a decision. The office is not a room that belonged to me. My wife used to use that space for gift wrapping and bills when the house had a different shape. Now it is a place for screens and precise noise. Cables hide in a snake basket under the desk. A little diffuser sits on a shelf releasing artificial pine into a world that has never had real pine in it. The window is blocked by a white shade that doesn't know the sun's name. The desk is pressed laminate that pretends to be oak and fools no one. On the monitor, a window was open like a mouth. It was an email client, the kind with folders lined up like soldiers and subject lines marching in date order. I recognized none of the names, but I knew the look of urgency. Even letters get tense. There were words I thought I had retired from my vocabulary. Reconciliation, vendor, transfer, audit. They read like a row of nails. My son's name sat beside messages with words like correction and wire and variance. There was a thread of conversation that had the tone of people making something happen in a hurry. One message at the top was from an address that matched his workplace domain, and it used phrases that wanted to be cautious while being bold, like, "Let's move this off thread," and "I'll call you," and "Timing is sensitive."
I didn't know what I was looking at. I knew how it felt. It felt close to heat. In the open tabs along the bottom, a spreadsheet sat minimized. It was called Q3_recon.xls. The name meant nothing to the part of me that knows wood, the part of me that has learned under duress to read paper, to hold envelopes up to the light, to smell when money's been folded too many times. That part leaned closer. I slid my phone from my pocket. It's not a good phone, but it has a camera that can see better than me sometimes. I turned the volume off with my thumb so it wouldn't make its polite shutter clack and betray me. I lifted it and took a picture of the screen. The screen flickered and the refresh made little lines across the image. I took 2 more from different angles, trying to catch lines and names and times. I knew I shouldn't touch the mouse, but something in my fingers craves movement. The mouse twitched with the tremor of my hand and woke the screen fully. More lines became clear. I did not breathe. The mouse pointer trembled in a corner of the monitor, like it was scared too.
Another page, another. I tried to hit the cancel button without looking like someone hitting cancel. The panel is a strip of dumb icons. I pressed the X. The X did nothing at first, and then it beeped a small, insulting beep that said I had not asked nicely. The next page came halfway out and stopped like a reluctant animal. "Everything okay?" my daughter-in-law called from the living room, voice dipped in honey, but I could hear the vinegar underneath. "Just the printer," I said, trying to make my voice the sound of a person who prints all the time, like that was my hobby, like tonight was a night for labels. "What are you printing?" she asked in the next breath. Before I could conjure a harmless word out of smoke, the hallway floor told the truth. It spoke with the methodical rhythm of my son's boots approaching. The printer purred louder, as if it wanted to be sure it would be heard, and the pages kept sliding out into my shaking hands. The pages kept coming like a small storm that had decided my hands were the only coast in the world. I slid the first 2 under the blotter and pinched the next with fingers that didn't belong to a burglar but were learning. The printer's insides sang their thin plastic song. Warm air from the exhaust kissed the back of my hand. The smell from it, hot paper and a hint of glue, dragged memories of report cards and library late fees into this room that had no books with real spines. My heart went loud enough that the mouse arrow trembled just from the pulse in my wrist. Boots crossed the hallway. My son's weight knows how to enter a room before his face does. He filled the office doorway, the light from the monitor cutting his shoulder into 2 colors, blue from the screen and beige from the hall lamp. He looked at the printer first, then at me, then at the paper in my hand. His mouth didn't move, and somehow that was worse than anything he could have said. "What are you doing?" he asked the room. "Not me." "Test page," I said, because a line needs to be as small as possible to survive. The page woke up on its own. I lifted my empty hand as if to show its emptiness. The other hand lay flat on the blotter, casual, on top of the small stack I'd made invisible.
He came into the room without asking permission from the floorboards. He tapped the printer once on the side, like you do with a toaster that forgets you're there, and peered at the display. The little lights blinked their neutral green. The half-fed page looked guilty, its bottom edge hovering between inside and out. "Cancel print jobs," he said, his thumb stabbing at the X with more enthusiasm than the machine expected. It beeped at him like it had beeped at me, a delicate bird refusing a giant hand. He grunted, yanked the page the rest of the way. The printer made a sound like a wheeze, and then stilled. He flipped the paper over. The logo at the top flashed a familiar shape I'd seen on coffee mugs around the apartment, his company's. He flicked his eyes to me. "You don't come in here," he said. His voice was low and careful. "You know that." "I came to turn off a light," I said, because the lie had to be smaller now. The light was on. It was a gift I could claim. Emily materialized on the edge of the doorway like a chorus ghost. She didn't look at the paper. She didn't look at my son's face. She made her eyes wide at me and then made them normal again, which is our signal for danger has entered and I'm here anyway. Behind her, the living room coughed applause at some joke that had survived a commercial break. My daughter-in-law arrived a beat later, following the heat that my son generates. She leaned in, one hand on the jamb, the other already opening. "Everything okay?" Her mouth put sugar on the words the way you dust a cake that didn't rise. "Printer woke itself," my son said, still watching me. "Dad was trying to fix it." She turned her head and made a sound between a laugh and a cluck. "Dad and Tech," she said, like it was a family joke we tell at holidays. "Such a team."
I let my hand drift from the blotter to my pocket where a handkerchief lived. My fingers found fabric, found a way to hold on without picking up anything else. The papers under the blotter felt like a secret animal, breathing. "I can put a passcode on the computer," she went on, addressing the air. "Just so he doesn't get confused and open things that are sensitive. It's not his fault, it's a lot to keep track of." "I'm not confused," I said to the mouse, which sat there with its little red eye. "I was turning off a light." My son took the half-printed page and slid it onto a pile of other papers on the desk, a stack with edges too straight and a binder clip that promised things. He put his hand on the top of the monitor and squeezed it like it was a shoulder, and then he turned to me. He stepped closer, not enough to be ugly, enough to remind me he could. The office smelled like the pine water from the diffuser and his beer breath when he exhaled small. "Stay out of here," he said again, and let a beat pass so the room could swallow it. "If you need something printed, ask. If you need a light turned off, I'll turn it off. If you want to sit somewhere, there are other chairs." "I hear you," I said, which is not the same as agreeing. It is what you say when you have to live in a house with other people's rules and still find a small country inside yourself where you make your own. Emily looked from him to me and back again. Her hand, at her side, curled and uncurled twice. With that little 2 count, she told me to breathe. It's a trick she learned from an app on her phone, the one with the circle that grows and shrinks, and bells that sound like an empty church. My daughter-in-law turned to Emily and smiled too hard. "Homework, sweetie," she said, and shut the office door with the gentleness of a person closing a cage. When they left, the room was 5 degrees warmer. My shirt stuck to my back. I stood for a second and let my muscles learn the new lesson, which was I was not allowed. Then I slid the papers from under the blotter, folded them in half once, then again. The creases cracked soft. I slipped the small square into the waistband of my pants, under my belt, skin against paper. It felt like wearing a fragile secret. I wiped the surface of the desk with the edge of my sleeve where my son's beer ring had dried into a dull circle, and then turned off the monitor like a priest putting out a candle. When I opened the door, the house went on pretending it hadn't been listening.
The television laughed at its own jokes. The dryer beeped from behind the pantry door as if it had achieved something grand. My son sat back on the couch like a mountain that had decided to stay. My daughter-in-law peeled a label off a glass jar in tiny, satisfyingly clean strips. Emily was halfway down the hall, leaning against the frame of her doorway, her body making itself into a question mark. "You good?" she mouthed. I nodded. The papers under my waistband crackled when I did. The sound was only for me. I went straight to the kitchen table, to the recipe notebook, to the cloth cover that is more my wife's face than any picture I own. I lifted it as if I were asking permission, and then slid the folded pages underneath the back cover. The fabric rose a whisper to accommodate the new belly. I set the book down gently as if something inside could bruise. A small relief moved through me, not happiness exactly, not safety, just the feeling of something being where it should be for a second long enough to breathe. "Dad," my daughter-in-law called from the couch, "did you take your evening pills?" "I will," I said, and went to the little plastic 7-day box she keeps on the counter like a shrine. Monday was open. It was not Monday. She likes to fill in for me and then treat me like a man who can't tell a day from an apple. I shook the right compartment into my palm and took the pills without water, the chalk taste going down like punishment. "Thank you," she sang, like she'd personally saved my life.
My son muted the TV and looked around the room like he was taking attendance at school. His eyes lingered on the office door, now closed. His jaw popped. He unmuted and decided to let the room breathe again. Emily drifted in the way steam returns after you lift a lid and set it down. She kept herself casually between the table and the couch, little person-shaped curtain. She reached for the recipe notebook like a granddaughter reaching for her grandmother's Bible. Her fingers on the cover were soft and respectful. She put it closer to me without making a show of it, giving me the act of protection disguised as neatness. She bent, pretended to retie her sneaker, and breathed later to the space near my knee like a spell. Later, I breathed back, with only my chest. The room slowed the way rooms do when everyone who lives in them is done pretending to have more conversation left. My daughter-in-law gathered her tumbler and went to the kitchen, washed it without leaving a trace, put it upside down on the rack like a lesson. My son scratched his chest through his t-shirt and yawned. He looked smaller when he yawned. For a blink, I saw the boy on the red bike with the baseball card clothespin to the back wheel so it would make the motor noise he liked, his knees shining with summer, smiling at me like I'd invented scooters. Then the man came back. "Lights out in an hour," he said toward the air. "Energy." "I'll make sure," my daughter-in-law said, and looked at the thermostat like it might catch fire from being at 70. I took the recipe notebook with me as if I were taking a plate to the sink. I carried it against my side the way you carry a warm loaf so you don't squash it. The weight of it felt right. My bedroom down the hall smelled like old wood and clean cotton, and a little bit like the shaving soap I never use anymore, but keep because the tin is red and says a city name on it. The lamp on my nightstand throws a small golden puddle. The bed knows the shape of me so well that sometimes I think it could tell time with my bones. I closed the door to the bedroom but didn't turn the lock. Locked doors in this house are announcements. Unlocked doors are safer if you plan to need more time. I set the notebook on the bedspread and pulled back the cover like I was undressing a memory. My wife's cursive stood up to the light with its own spine. The folded sheets creaked when I pulled them out from under the back cover. I laid them flat on the quilt, palms smoothing the creases the way a man does when he can't fix much else, but this paper can be made obedient. The text on the pages was neat and black and spoke a language I haven't read since I stopped building for a living and started surviving. It had that corporate tone that sounds like a room with glass walls. It repeated itself in places with slight differences, like a liar refining a story. There were numbers, 5s with flat tops, 2s with loops, 0s in pairs that looked like eyes. The letterhead at the top of each page had a small blocky logo, and the name below it was my son's company. The subject line of the printed email thread read, Q3 Vendor Reconciliation, Follow-Up. The emails were clipped short, times lined up on the right, initials at the bottom like little stamps of permission. I didn't understand all the content. I didn't need to. I recognized the smell of hurry. I recognized the way people write when they're not sure who else will see. One message had a sentence that made the hair on my arm do what hair does when it hears news before the mind does. Let's move this off email and finalize later tonight. Another used the word variance like it was a normal thing you see in a kitchen. A chain about wires moving from one account to another had a reply from my son that said, "Got it. I'll fix the entry on my end."
On the second page, a spreadsheet printout in black and white reduced columns to narrow highways crowded with cars. Vendor names I didn't recognize lined the left. Amounts that started with numbers I do not say out loud without breathing first stacked up on the right. In the margin, near a number that had too many zeros, someone had typed a comment bubble. Temp placeholder, clean up post-reconciliation. The initials beside the comment were my son's. I felt anger then, not the hot kind that swings arms, the cold kind that looks for a chair and sits down and plans to live a long time. The anger remembered every time my daughter-in-law's hand took my envelope and called me forgetful. It remembered the smile my son wears when he tells me about savings and sacrifice and sweaters. It remembered my wife's voice on the page telling me to listen for onions when they turn sweet. I took my phone from my pocket. It woke and showed me my own face in the black glass for a second. Tired, older than I ever intended to get, cheek blooming in a color that will be a bruise by morning. I turned on the camera and took pictures of the pages. I moved slow. The lens clicked softly and the sound felt loud anyway. I held my breath like I was underwater and counted, pretending a distant app bell was blooming and shrinking. My hands were steady the way your hands get steady when you hold a baby or a bomb. There were other things I wanted to photograph. The kitchen floor with its soup constellation, the towel with my blood in a circle smaller than a penny, my face. But those wanted their own plan. Tonight was a night for small, brave things that made no sound. I folded the pages again and slid them back into the book, deeper this time, under a layer of old recipes my wife copied from library magazines. Meatloaf, banana bread, a list titled Sunday Roast for Company. I closed the cover and put the book into the bottom drawer of my dresser, under the stack of shirts that don't fit me quite right anymore because my shoulders have opinions now. Then I hesitated and pulled it back out. The dresser drawer seemed too obvious. I turned and put the book in a place that smells like her, under the pillow. I slid it flat so the pillow rose a small hill and then settled. My cheek would know it was there later, and I would not forget in the morning. I sat on the edge of the bed and breathed for 6 heartbeats because Emily would tell me to. The clock on the nightstand blinked 9:27 in a patient cheap red. The building made one of its deep old sighs, pipes talking to themselves in the walls. It was a good time to decide something. I stood and went to my small desk, the one with the nick from when my son was 6 and used a fork to make holes in a line just to see if he could. In the top drawer is a pad of yellow paper I hoard like it is rare. The top page is clean and eager. I picked up the pencil I sharpened with a knife because I like the messy wood curl, and I wrote 12 words that came out more like me than anything I've said lately. My name is Edward. I need help. Please don't knock. Room 5A. I folded the note twice. I put my shoes back on and listened to the hallway through the door.
silence, and a small, distant piano note. I turned the knob quietly. The hall sensor light clicked on and made the carpet look like a cheap hotel. It smelled faintly of someone's cologne and someone else's dinner. I walked past the thermostat that can't be touched from the outside and past the dent in the wall where someone once moved a dresser. At 3B, I crouched and slid the note under the door, gently, with 2 fingers, pushing until it disappeared completely like a trick coin. I stood and walked back to my door like a man carrying a bowl brimful. Inside, the apartment had arranged itself into night. The TV volume was lower. My son's laugh had become a quiet exhale. The kitchen was dark except for the glow of the microwave clock. Emily's door was a rectangle of shadow with a warm slice beneath. I closed my bedroom door again and sat on the bed and put my hands on my knees the way my father used to before he told me things.
Waiting at this age is different than waiting was when I was 20. Back then, my body offered distractions. Now it offers conversations I don't always want to have. I watched the red numbers on the clock change like a heartbeat I could control if I stared hard enough. I looked at the pattern on my quilt, blue triangles marching around in a ring like they were meant to protect something in the center. The air had gone still. The radiator quieted, as if it too were holding its breath. A shadow moved at the crack at the bottom of my door. Light from the hallway underlined it. It passed, it came back, it stayed. I could hear the pause of someone listening. The shadow lifted, like a head cocked to the side. It moved away again. I breathed. The building breathed. The softest sound then like a mouse pushing paper. Something slid under my door and came to rest against the inside wood with a gentle, official sound. I waited 2 more breaths and then stood and picked it up. A business card, crisp, with edges like small laws. White with black print. A name in the center, My 11, attorney at law. Under it, a phone number and an email. On the back, a hand had written in blue pen, careful print, "From 3B. She's good. Call or email. I am up." My throat did something I wasn't expecting. I swallowed and it hurt in a good way. I sat down and put the card on the quilt like a tile in a new floor. I took my phone and opened the camera roll and chose the photos I had taken. I started an email and addressed it to the name on the card. My thumbs, an old man's thumbs, finding their way around glass like a man finds his way around a town he used to know. In the subject, I wrote simply, "Help." In the body, I wrote my name and the apartment and that I had images I was afraid would disappear. I wrote that it was late and I was sorry to write late. I attached the photos. I reread the email twice and found 2 small spelling mistakes and fixed them. I read it again and stared at the word send until it blurred. I pressed it. The phone made its small whoosh, and I hated it for announcing me to anyone who might be listening. It also comforted me. I imagined the email crossing a distance I couldn't measure. A little arrow with my name on it flying into a place I have never been. I stayed very still after that, as if moving would reveal what I had done. Less than a breath later, the phone vibrated. Not a ring, a polite buzz. A little insect in my hand. A message slid down the screen from an address I didn't know, and then another from the same, and then a third. The first said, "Received." The second said, "Will review." The third said, "Can you talk for 5 minutes?" The timestamps marched like good soldiers. The handle of my bedroom door twitched. It was the smallest motion, metal whispering under skin, but it took up the whole room. It turned a degree and then a degree more, the way a person turns a thought they are not sure they should have. The sound of a sock in the hallway scuffed against the wood like someone shifting weight. My phone lit my palm. The screen showed an incoming call from an unknown number that in a second resolved into a name as if it had always known it. My 11.
The knob began to turn as the phone in my hand lit with her name, and I stood there with 1 second left to choose which thing to save. If this story is reaching you, leave your like and write in the comments your opinion about this story, and share it with your friends. I answered and moved. I put the phone to my chest to smother its light, slid off the bed and crossed the carpet with my feet, remembering how to be quiet. The knob slowed when the boards under me didn't complain. I opened the bathroom door with 2 fingers and slipped inside, pulled it almost shut and turned on the fan. The fan isn't loud, but it makes white noise that gives a man privacy. The mirror showed my face in the same cheap light that lives over every bathroom in America. My cheek had begun to color, deepening toward a bloom that would speak for me tomorrow, whether I wanted it to or not.
I lifted the phone to my ear. "Hello," I whispered. "Mr. Edward?" a woman's voice said, crisp and low. "This is Maya. You can say yes or no. Is it safe to talk for 2 minutes?" Yes," I said, the fan swallowing the second "yeah." "Good. First, don't confront anyone. Don't print anything more. Photograph everything you already have and send it to me. Include your face if you have a mark. Leave things as they are otherwise. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Can you speak freely for 10 seconds? Tell me what happened in the simplest way." "Soup," I said, ridiculous word, heavy as a stone. "He hit my shoulder, I fell, face got hit, they control my mail, I found emails on his computer, company, money language, printer, woke up." "Okay," she said, the word like a landing. "Do you have someone in the building who can be with you for the next hour? A neighbor? Anyone you trust?" 3B, I said, and the act of saying that made me feel a little less alone. "Good. I want you to do 3 things in order. 1. Take photos of your face and any other marks. Use your phone's timestamp. Don't edit. 2. Write a simple timeline of tonight with times as best you can remember. 3. Put the papers you printed somewhere safe. If you can, make digital copies. I'll also email you a preservation letter for his employer's compliance department. Don't send it yet. Don't tell him you called me. Are you able to email from your own device?" "Yes." "Last thing, if you feel unsafe, call 911. If not, we will log an elder abuse report first thing in the morning. I can also make that call and get you a case number. I'll text you my secure upload link. If you can get a witness to see your face tonight, even better. I'll stay by the phone. Can I call you back in 20 minutes? "Yes." "Okay, you're doing the right thing. 2 breaths, Mr. Edward. In, out. I'll be here." The call ended. The fan's small, steady churn remained like a metronome. I looked at myself in the mirror again, as if to check that I was still the one inside this body. The bruise was beginning to declare a border, dark at the center, pale toward the edges, like an ink spill on napkin. I lifted my shirt collar. The shoulder would be worse. It was tender, heat under skin. I took the first photo. The phone flared the bathroom's pale light. The shutter sound was off. I turned my face left, then right, then straight ahead. I touched the lower button to show the timestamp in the corner. I took 2 close-ups of my shoulder, awkward angles, the camera catching my own breath fog in the glass for a second. I took a picture of my finger with the little cartoon bandage and the dot of dried red, peeking like a confession. I breathed once, the way Emily taught me, and filled my chest in the same rhythm the fan suggested. I opened the door and listened.
The hallway outside my bedroom was quiet, the living room a low ocean of television. A laugh track rose and fell like a person breathing in another room. Someone walked past my door and kept going. Socks, not boots. The floor told me these things the way it tells you winter is coming 4 days before the forecast does. I went to my dresser, slid open the top drawer, and pulled out the yellow legal pad and the pencil I sharpen with a knife. I sat on the edge of the bed and wrote as if I were building a step-by-step to teach a boy how to fix a thing without breaking it. 7:10 p.m., soup spilled. 7:12, shoulder hit, fell, cheek hit cabinet. 7:20, pizza arrived. 7:45, neighbor at door. 8:10, office door open. 8:15, printer started. Emails visible, photos taken. 8:30, papers printed, hid in book. 9:33, email sent to attorney. 9:33, call received. I left space between lines in case memory gave me more later. I put the pencil down and noticed I was grinding my teeth. I stopped, the way you do when someone points to a bad habit and you realize they're right.
On the back of the car the neighbor had slipped me. The neat hand had written, "I am up." I walked to my door and opened it half an inch. The hall light breathed on, a mechanical dawn. I slid my own note under 3B earlier, and my thanks had been answered with the business card. Now I bent and slipped another 2 words under her door, "Comin' now." I waited, holding my breath like a boy game. A soft scrape, the door opened 4 inches, a bright wedge. Her eye, then her whole face came into the crack. She held a finger to her lips and then pointed toward my door in a question. I nodded. In another second, she was in my bedroom, and we were both closing the door like thieves. She didn't say a thing, just took me in, eyes making a quiet circuit, the way nurses do when you walk into the ER holding your own hand. She wore the same socks, gray with a darker gray heel, and a sweater that looked like it belonged by a campfire. She had a tote bag with a city's name on it in a serif font. She set it on my chair, and out came a little scanner the size of a loaf of bread, a pad of sticky notes, a pen with blue ink, and a thermometer in a case. She held up the thermometer in a question again. I didn't know why that mattered, but I nodded. She slipped the strip under my tongue and waited, eyes on the little screen until it beeped. She wrote the number on a sticky note and the time, 9:41 p.m. She did the same with my pulse, 2 fingers on my wrist, counting quietly with her mouth. She wrote that down too. I showed her the yellow pad and the photos, my face feeling like a document now than a face. She kept her own face soft. She pointed to the bed, and I lifted the pillow and pulled out the recipe book. Something in me was embarrassed to show it, like I was revealing more than paper. She touched the cover lightly. Not reverent exactly, but careful. She looked at the pages I had hidden. She read just enough for the muscles along her jaw to tighten once. She nodded toward the scanner. We worked without words. She fed the pages through. The little machine made a hopeful whir and spit PDFs into her laptop with names that meant something later. The glow from the screen painted our hands blue. The bedroom smelled like the fan from the bathroom, and under that the vanilla of old paper and a faint ghost of my wife's hand cream that lives in the drawer even when the tube is closed. The neighbor plugged a USB stick into her machine and made a copy, then another, labeling each with tonight's date and a short phrase, Ed Papers. She slid one USB into my palm and closed my fingers around it as if it were a coin you give a ferryman. She took more photos of my face with my phone and hers, made sure the time was visible, made an image of the soup stain on my pants and the tiny cut on my finger from the ceramic, and the towel with the pink circle when a drop of blood decided to leave me. We didn't turn on the overhead light. The small lamp was enough. The lamp makes the room feel like a place you can trust. I opened my email. Maya's message was already there. Subject line in plain language. Received. Next steps. 2 attachments. One was the letter she called a preservation notice. It had the company's name in the header and a space for a compliance email that she had filled in. It spelled out in simple words that we believed relevant records existed and that the company should take steps to preserve them under its own policies. It didn't accuse, it didn't shout, it just set a table. The other attachment was a short, clear note to my bank revoking any informal authority or shared access I had unwisely extended and asking that no third party be permitted to initiate transfers without my signature in person. It gave a number to a 24-hour fraud line. There was a third email, too, that arrived as we watched. Intake prepared, APS, draft. It contained a template for reporting elder abuse with blanks for the facts and a promise to call at 8 a.m. to open a case and get a number. She wrote, in one line under her signature, "Breathe." It felt bossy and kind at once. I printed nothing. I saved all 3 attachments to my phone, then to the small drive the neighbor had given me, then to an online folder Emily had taught me to use months ago to keep pictures from disappearing when I dropped my phone in the sink. I sent them back to Maya with a thank you small enough to pass through the eye of this night. The neighbor made a list on her pad, as if she were building a new set of shelves in the closet of my life. She wrote, "Photos taken, time logged, documents scanned, USB signed, email to lawyer sent." Under that she wrote, in heavier letters, "Do not engage." And she looked at me and spoke for the first time since stepping through my door. "I'm across the hall," she said, barely above a breath. "If you need me, knock. If you can't knock, bang once." She made a circle in the air that meant "I'm here," and she packed the scanner and the little ritual items back into her tote and slipped out. The hall light woke and then expired behind her like an animal that only lives on motion. The room felt briefly larger without her, then like itself again. I sat. My hands were steady, but I could feel a tremor in the place where the body stores today's fear. It was not in my hands, not in my feet, it was somewhere between. I put the recipe book back under the pillow and flattened it with my palm and felt the bump that meant something important was under my head and not leaving. The phone buzzed. Maya again. "Can you send your timeline now? Also, please take 2 photos of the kitchen floor where the soup spilled and of the printer as it looks now. Don't move anything. If you can do so unnoticed." I lifted my head and listened. The TV's volume had risen enough to mean my son had forgotten anyone else existed. The dishwasher had begun its cycle, the water in the pipes sang a familiar hallway song. No boots on wood. I opened my door and slid across the hallway fast enough to feel adrenaline and slow enough not to wake the house. The kitchen was lit only by the microwave clock and the under-cabinet strip that makes everything look like a set. The soup was a memory now, a faint slick in the grout, a carrot coin dried to a thin yolk. I took 2 photos from 2 angles. The printer glowed in its corner like a small city at night. I took a photo. I put my phone back in my pocket and breathed out, a tiny victory, and heard the living room couch complain as someone shifted weight. I slid back into my room and closed the door, and the air changed from communal to mine. I sent the photos. I sent my timeline. I added one detail, the little key Emily had hidden under the recipe book earlier. I didn't know what it opened. I didn't mention it to Maya. That detail I wrote on my yellow pad for myself instead. Key with green tag. Emily put it there. My phone buzzed. "Thank you," Maya wrote. "Good. I'll draft and send a compliance email for your review. Do not send until we talk at 7 a.m. Keep your phone on silent. If anyone asks, you couldn't sleep and you're reading. Do you have someone who can be with you at dawn for coffee?" "Yes," I wrote. 3B. "Good. Last thing, secure your essentials in a bag in case you need to step out tomorrow. ID, insurance, bank card, medication list, your phone charger. Keep the USB on you." She added, "I know this is a lot, one step at a time." One step at a time. That is how my wife told me to chop onions. Don't look at the pile, look at the next slice.
I took the old canvas gym bag from the closet. It used to carry sneakers and a towel when I still went places like the Y. I put into it my ID, my Medicare card, the insurance card that always wants to slide under other things, my bank card, and the little booklet with my medications in my own handwriting that my daughter-in-law calls cute. I put a spare phone charger and the USB the neighbor had given me in the inside pocket. I added the yellow pad and the pen. I looked at the recipe book and my hand lifted to include it, then lowered. It could not leave this room yet. It was the house's heart, and I needed it to keep beating here. I sat on the bed with the bag next to me. The clock walked from 10 to 11 as if it had nowhere else to go. The building changed its tune. The pipes went quiet. Someone on 6 dropped something the sound of a marble. The elevator clanked once and then rested. The night settled around my shoulders like an old wool sweater. Emily knocked once, the polite way. I opened the door and she slid in, bare feet, hair down, eyes wide in the dim. She didn't look at my face long. She looked at my hands, at the bag, at the edge of the recipe book just visible under the pillow. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed and hugged her knees. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I will be," I said. Saying will is different than saying am. She is old enough to hear the difference. She nodded toward the pillow. "You put it there," she said, proud like a co-conspirator watching the bomb tick correctly. "Safe place," I said. She reached into the big front pocket of her hoodie and brought out a small, square thing on a red lanyard, a portable charger she got for free at a school event where they gave out pens and water bottles and a sense that the future is promotional. She put it on my nightstand. "For your phone," she said. "It dies at the worst times." "Thank you," I said. My voice wanted to break, so I put it away in a drawer for later. Her hand went to the bed skirt and lifted it. She looked at the space under the bed as if monsters were paperwork now. "They don't look under here," she said. "Only in drawers." "Good to know," I said. She glanced toward the door and then leaned closer. "The key," she whispered. "I found it in the desk drawer by the printer. It's for a little lockbox. I saw him put a hard drive there once." She swallowed. "I didn't open it. I just saw." "You did the right thing," I said. "One step at a time." Her face rearranged itself into something that had room for pride and fear at once. "I can't stand it when they treat you like you're a child," she said, the words everything and nothing at once. "You taught me to cut apples with the knife pointing away. You remember that. Good." She looked at my cheek and made a small fist with one hand and then unmade it. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. "Not as much as it did. It's a messenger. We're listening." She nodded like a soldier, stood and smiled at me the way she did when she was 3 and she put a sticker on my forehead. "I can sleep now," she said. "Can you?" "Soon," I said. "Go." She tiptoed out. The hallway light did its trick and then went dark. My room was a pool with one goldfish of a lamb. I texted Maya one last time. "I have a key. Might open a box with a drive in the office." She wrote back almost immediately, as if she had been sitting on the other side of my wall. "Don't use it tonight. If it's his work device, it belongs to his employer. We will let them handle that. Keep the key safe. Also, I filed a preliminary report with APS. We will complete it at 8 a.m. The number is 2023. She gave me the rest of the digits. I wrote them on a sticky note and put it inside the recipe book like it was a page number. The house yawned into midnight. My son's laugh grew softer, then the TV clicked off.
The living room made the kinds of noises living rooms make when people climb stairs inside them. The dishwasher clicked quiet. The refrigerator hummed like it was thinking. The fan in the bathroom whirred itself to a soft stop. Silence rolled in slow and steady. I lay back on the bed and felt the small lift of the book under my pillow. I laid my hand over it and felt the outline of my wife's cloth cover, the seam at the edge, the place where the fabric frays a little, and I always smooth it without thinking. Around 3, the deep, useless hour, I got up and made more notes. The yellow pad filled with things that would matter tomorrow. The time of the pizza, the words my daughter-in-law used when she said team, the pitch of my son's voice when he said stay out. I drew a small square where the printer lives and wrote next to it, warm paper smell, logo on top, Q3 Recon. I wrote eggs on sale, neighbor offering. I wrote thermostat 68. I wrote blanket for Emily's feet. Writing it all down kept the details from leaking away. It made the night into something I could fold and put in a pocket. It made me feel like myself, the man who used to measure twice and cut once. When the window began to go from black to blue, the world took a breath I recognized. The birds that live in the little tree by the back entrance tested a note quietly. The building woke in increments. Pipes muttered. Someone on 2 coughed. A cart rolled in the hallway outside. I turned on the kitchen light and the apartment did not complain. I moved around with the care of a man cooking in someone else's house, even though this is my house, down to the screws in the hinges. Coffee is the smell of morning, even if you don't drink it. I put grounds in the machine, the old kind, not the pod. The paper filter unfolded like an origami bird and settled. The water came from the tap cold and woke my hands. When the machine began to breathe and then gurgle and then steam, the sound stitched up the night behind it. I put 2 mugs on the counter, one for me and one for the neighbor. I set a plate of crackers because crackers are a kind of welcome when you have nothing else to offer and you need to put something on a table between you and the world. I took the recipe book from under my pillow and set it in the center of the kitchen table. I put the sticky note with the APS number on the first page like a bright flag. I slid the yellow pad next to it with the notes I'd taken. The USB with the copied pages I put on top of the book like a small silver guardian. I felt the urge to straighten the pen beside it and did so. The table looked like a place where decisions happen, not where soup gets salted. There was a soft knock at the door, polite the way Dawn is polite. I opened it to find the neighbor from 3B in a sweatshirt with the university where her cousin went, and a face that said she had slept little and will nap later. She had a small paper bag in one hand, and the other hand tucked into her pocket for warmth. Her hair was up, practical. "I didn't want to text," she said by way of hello. "Walls have ears." "Come," I said, and stood aside. The hallway breathed and then stopped. The light made its tired yellow and went off again as the door closed. She put the paper bag on the counter. "Bagels," she said. "They're good when they're bad." We ate our bad good bagels with cream cheese that's been in my fridge since last Tuesday. She took her coffee the color of paper. I made mine weak. We didn't fill the air with words. We let the room be what it was. The kind of place where a neighbor stands witness while a man keeps his nerve. She took the yellow pad and read the lines I had written and nodded at all the right places. When she got to the line about the key, she tapped it twice with her nail and then looked at my face. I shook my head once. "Not yet." She nodded. "Good," she said. My phone vibrated at 7 like a bakery alarm. Maya's name came up again. I put it on speaker and set it on the table, facing up, as if she were a third-place set. Her voice came through calm, daylight in it now. "Good morning," she said. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," I said. "That's enough for now," she said.
I have the preservation letter ready. I'll come by in 45 minutes with 2 copies and a simple revocation for any prior account access you may have given your family. We'll also finish the APS report together on the phone so they logged your voice. You'll need your IDs? Is the neighbor with you? Yes, the neighbor said, leaning in so her breath touched the phone like steam. Thank you for being there, Maya said. We'll need you to sign as a witness that you saw Mr. Edwards' face last night and this morning. You don't need to do anything else. I've also prepared a short email to the company's compliance department. We won't send it until we have our ducks in a row. Today is about preserving and placing. Okay, I said. The word felt like a small boat, but at least it floated. We ended the call and the room returned to its own air. The neighbor made a small, tired laugh. Placing and preserving, she said. I wish I'd have that in my back pocket 10 years ago. You and me both, I said. Emily's door opened, careful, like a child cracking an egg. She came into the kitchen, hair stuck to one cheek from sleep, sweatshirt sleeves too long, face bright in that unself-conscious morning way. She stopped when she saw the neighbor, then smiled small. She took in the table with its arrangement, the book, the pad, the USB, the sticky note. Her eyes lit in that way that means she likes the way the pieces fit. Hungry? I asked, and she nodded. She took a bagel from the bag, spread cream cheese with the butter knife, then stopped and turned the knife handle toward me. She put the jar closer to my side. That simple reversal felt like such a kindness that I had to turn and look out the window at the sky for a second. We have to be quiet, she said to the neighbor, who winked at her like an aunt. We're church mice, just louder inside. Emily chewed and then pointed with her chin at the sticky note. What's that? A number I need. A person will listen when I call it. She nodded seriously and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. The phone buzzed with an email. Maya, again. On my way. She'd attached PDFs with polite names and clear, heavy words. The neighbor peered at the screen when I tilted it. She blew out a slow breath, the kind you blow when a cake doesn't fall. You picked a good one, she said. My daughter-in-law appeared at the other end of the hall, wrapped in a robe that matched the kitchen tile too well to be an accident. She blinked at the light, at the neighbor, at the table set up like we were doing homework. For a second, she was just a person who hadn't had her coffee. Then she remembered herself. She lifted her eyebrows in a practiced question. Morning, 2 syllables turned into 4. Early.
Couldn't sleep, I said. Me either, the neighbor said, smiling into her coffee. He invited me for bagels. You want one? She held up the bag and shook it, casual as anything. My daughter-in-law considered the optics, stepped into the kitchen and took a half, then tore it into 2 smaller halves she wouldn't eat. Thanks, she said, and glanced at the recipe book on the table as if it had grown legs. She pressed her hand flat on the counter. What's this about? She asked the air, but her eyes were all questions to me. Just making lists, I said, tapping the pad. Doctor times, prescriptions. You said Thursday. She let that land, let it roll back and forth on the table like a bead. She nodded. Right. Good. If you're up for it, would you mind switching the laundry later? I started some overnight and forgot. Of course, I said. And the word of course did what it always does in this house. It kept the peace another 5 minutes. Emily stood and put her plate in the sink and ran water over it so the cream cheese wouldn't become an archaeological layer. She wiped the counter with a circle, wiped the knife, put it back in the drawer soundlessly. She came to my side and put her hand on the back of my chair, a small touch that felt like a pledge. My daughter-in-law clocked the touch, filed it under something, and decided, for now, to leave it be. The neighbor excused herself with a smile that said she understood currents. I'll be around, she said. Thanks for the coffee. It was good and bad just like it should be. She washed her mug, dried it with the towel, and set it on the rack with the bottom facing up just so. She patted my shoulder as she went by in a way that was nothing and everything. The hallway light breathed on for her and went out behind like a book closing. The apartment recalibrated. The refrigerator hummed a little louder. The smell of coffee settled into the curtains. The sticky note on the book glowed like a small warning flare. I made myself another cup of weak coffee and sat. The chair held me the way it holds me every morning. Emily sat across from me and took out her math notebook and made numbers behave. My daughter-in-law cleaned a clean counter and checked a list on her phone and then disappeared into the bedroom to become the person she is in photographs. At 7:45, there was a knock that was not a neighbor's. It was a knock calculated to be confident and not aggressive, the way professionals knock. I opened the door, and there was Maya, shorter than her voice, with hair pulled back, a coat that looked like it understood weather, and a bag with the same kind of neatness in it that lives in her sentences. She stepped in, offered her hand, and looked into my face in a way that recorded more than she said. She introduced herself to the air, to the room, to my daughter-in-law, who appeared on cue with an expression too bright. Maya's handshake to her was exactly firm enough to mean, "I see you and am not interested in playing," and not an ounce more. We sat at the table the way people sit at arbitration. Maya laid out the papers, one after the other, narrating without showing off. Preservation letter, a simple notice to the bank, a revocation of any blanket permissions, a one-page description of what had occurred last night, written in her words but made of my facts. She slid a pen in my hand and put the pages in a stack. She asked for my ID and took a photo of it with her phone after asking, and waited for me to say yes twice. She called APS on speaker, and the voice on the other end was a cheerful, serious person who asked for names and times and what color the towel was on the floor and how high the thermostat had been set. They gave us a number that sounded like a license plate. Maya wrote it in the top right corner of each page in pencil and handed me the pencil so I could do it too.
She asked my daughter-in-law to sign as a witness that she had seen me this morning, and my daughter-in-law set her mouth, considered the optics again, and declined with a smile that had a door in it. The neighbors stepped across the hall at just the right moment, maybe she'd been listening for this exact chord, and signed instead, print letters neat as fence posts. Maya thanked her like a person thanks a nurse. Emily sat through it with her pencil moving in her own notebook, silent, a silent metronome for my heart. She looked up sometimes at a word she didn't know and asked later, quietly. Maya saw her and let her be, which is a skill adults forget. When it was done to this point, Maya gathered the signed copies and put one in a manila folder that smelled like every office I ever worked in and handed the other to me to keep. She slid a small card out of her bag, her card, and wrote on the back in the same crisp hand, "Call me before any conversation." She put it under the corner of the recipe book as if she were saving a place in a story. "We don't send the company letter yet," she said softly, her voice something I could lean against. "We'll review it together after I've written a brief note for context. We don't confront anyone. We let processes start their engines. This will feel slow. That's okay. Slow is our friend." I said slow is my specialty. The room smiled at that, even my daughter-in-law, who couldn't help it. Maya stood, and the room stood with her. She shook my hand again, and then, without announcement, poured herself a half-inch more coffee and drank it, probably the worst coffee she'll have today, and smiled as if it was fine. She told me she'd be back later with a notary, or we would go to one, depending. She said her office would file what needed filing. She looked at my face once more and nodded, satisfied that the bruise was doing its other job. It would make other people believe me. After she left, the door closed gently, and the hallway light made its usual show and then went dark. The apartment seemed to exhale. Emily let her pencil fall and rubbed the bridge of her nose. My son came out of the bedroom finally, hair messy, eyes puffy, and looked around at the table, at the neighbor's signature on a page he didn't recognize, at the way the air smelled, and the way people were holding themselves like a different kind of morning had risen. He opened his mouth and then closed it. I refilled my cup and sat. The recipe book lay open to the page for soup, the margin note from my wife circling the words, "Taste first." The sticky note with the number looked like a small yellow sun stuck to a winter sky. The USB caught a ray of real sunlight that had made its way between buildings and threw it back politely. I could feel the shape of the day ahead without seeing it. It would be a day of doors opening that had been painted shut for years. It would be a day of numbers finding their correct lines. It would be a day with less shouting and more writing. In that sense, it would be my kind of day. I took one breath in and one out, and the house matched me. I rested my hand flat on the cloth cover, the way you touch a shoulder to say, "I'm here," and let the morning sit with me without asking it to be anything else. Maya didn't have to tell me when the day turned. I felt it in the way the house rearranged its breath.
The morning held still, the kind of stillness that happens when everyone is pretending it's just another Tuesday and the walls know better. The coffee went from hot to room temperature. The light over the table cut a bright circle on the wood, and in the center of it I set the recipe book open to the soup page. The sticky note with the APS number winked up at me like a yellow eye. Emily sat across from me, pencil moving, small foot tapping a 4 count on the rung of her chair. My daughter-in-law fluttered in and out of the kitchen like a moth, wiping a clean counter, moving unneeded lemons from bowl to bowl, checking her phone. My son appeared and disappeared and finally settled on the couch, holding his mug like a prop. At 9, my daughter-in-law tried to use the banking app on her phone. I didn't see the screen, I saw her face see it. Her mouth thin, she blinked like something had flown into her eye. She tried again. She walked to the thermostat, tapped it twice as if that would make the bank listen. She turned to me with the smile she wears for teachers and police. "Dad," she said, light as powdered sugar, "our joint view is showing an error. Did you do something?" "I secured my account," I said, and kept my hand on the cloth cover of the book. "Maya prepared a leather." "Maya," she repeated, flattening the name like dough. "Right." My son half turned from the couch like a man waking in a tent. "What letter?" "A revocation," I said. The word felt like a block being slid into place. "No more shared access. If a transfer needs to happen, I'll sign for it, in person." He looked at my daughter-in-law and then at me and found no place to land. "We talked about this," he said, voice deepening, the way a man uses a voice to persuade boards and teenagers. "We'll talk some more," I said, and the room knew what I meant. The talk was coming in a different language now and with an audience. At 10, there was another knock at the door, and Maya walked in with the notary, a soft-spoken man with a stamp, and the kind of administrative silence that smells like ink and patience. She took her coat off, folded it over the back of a chair, and set her bag on the table like a surgeon sets down a tray. She shook my son's hand, shook my daughter-in-law's hand, and thanked the neighbor for the coffee she wasn't holding, as if she could taste it on the air. Then she put papers in front of me and pointed. I signed. The notary stamped. It made a little thump that felt private and public at once. The stamp left a raised seal that you can feel with your fingertip and believe in even with your eyes closed. "This revocation is already on file with the bank," Maya said, her voice even. "They'll confirm by phone in a moment." She pulled out her cell and dialed, pressed a button, and a bank voice came through the speaker, pitched to be soothing, not helpful. After the security questions that sound like riddles, the voice said the words that changed the house's temperature. "We've updated your profile, Mr. Edward. Only you can access or authorize transfers. We're adding a note to your account. If anyone calls to act on your behalf, we'll require your presence at a branch." "Thank you," I said to the disembodied woman, and meant it the way you mean it to a nurse who finds the vein on the first try. My daughter-in-law's face tried to shore itself up and failed. She blew out a breath through her nose and opened her mouth and then closed it. She was good at plans. She had not planned for this. Maya reached into her bag and laid a single-page letter on the table. "This is the preservation request," she said. "It's addressed to your employer's compliance department." She looked at my son as she said employer and then looked back at me. "We are asking them to preserve relevant emails and accounting records as part of their internal policies. We don't make accusations in this letter. We simply ask that nothing be destroyed."
My son laughed, a small sound that had more teeth than humor. "Preserve what? Dad doesn't know what he saw. He's confused. He hit his head. You can't just threaten the company." Maya didn't flinch. "We're not threatening," she said. "We're asking them to follow their own rules." She slid the letter toward me. "I can send this from my office, but I prefer you to press send from your own email, Mr. Edward, so the originating address is yours. I'll stand with you while you do." I opened my phone, opened my email, pulled up the draft she had already put together and left in my outbox like a bird in a hand. Emily watched my thumbs move and breathed with me. I pressed send. The phone made its treacherous whoosh. The living room went a degree colder. Maya looked at my son and my daughter-in-law and smiled a smile I have only ever seen on a skilled carpenter's face when a level shows true. "They'll respond quickly," she said. "It's what they do." It was what they did. 10 minutes later, an email arrived, and then my phone rang with a number that my son recognized before I did. It tightened his jaw. Maya asked me if she could put it on speaker, and I nodded. The voice that came through belonged to a woman who could walk through a crowded room without spilling a drop. "This is Danielle from the compliance office," she said. "May I confirm that I'm speaking with Mr. Edward?" I told her yes. "We've received your preservation request. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. As a matter of policy, we've initiated a hold on the relevant data and are commencing a review. Can you tell me in your own words what prompted your request?" "My son's printer woke up," I said, and for a moment in the telling it sounded childish. It printed emails, numbers, words like reconciliation. I took pictures. I have the pages. "And may I ask for your son's name for our records?" I said his name. The room flinched like a muscle. My son moved his mug as if it had become heavy. "That's appropriate," Danielle said. "For transparency, I need to inform you that we will be contacting your son's manager and our legal team. We may require the return of company property for review today. Is your son there now? If so, with your permission, I'd like to speak with him after we conclude this call with you. Miss Levin, I see you CC'd. Thank you." "I'm here," Maya said. "I'll stay on the line with Mr. Edward." "Mr. Edward," Danielle continued, "we will send you an acknowledgement via email that includes a case reference number. Do you have any physical items that you believe belong to the company?" I looked at the recipe book and then at Emily, who gave me the smallest nod a human body can give. I looked at the drawer in the office with the lock on it. "There's a key," I said, and picked it up from the table where I had put it under the book's corner. The little green tag caught the light. "It opens a box in the office. My son keeps drives there. I have not opened it. I am not going to open it." "That's appropriate," Danielle said. "Please do not access any company devices. If you are willing to turn over the key to your son so he can produce all company materials when requested, that will expedite our process." "I will hand this to him when your courier arrives," I said. The word courier made the day feel like a downtown I haven't walked in years.
"That's acceptable," she said. "We'll arrange for a representative to pick up the devices today. We will call your son to confirm location and cooperation expectations. Thank you again. Do you have any questions?" "I just have one," I said. "Will there be a record of this call in your system?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation. "A full log. You'll receive the case number in a minute." "I appreciate that," I said, and meant it with the specific gratitude an old man reserves for paperwork that does what it promises.
Maya ended the call with a thank you that had no sugar. A fresh email appeared with a case number and a block of language that looked like it had survived 3 lawyers. Maya read it, nodded, and looked at my son. "You heard her," she said, not unkindly. He lifted his hands, palms up, an act of theater he has practiced since he was 10. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Dan, you've let yourself get wound up by strangers. There's nothing to preserve. It was a reconciliation. It's literally the name of the file. You don't understand how this works." "I don't," I said, and felt the truth of it settle without shame. "I do understand how falling feels. I understand what it is to have my money handled like it's a toy. And I understand what a letter does when it lands in a system that's bigger than you." His face did a series of small changes. He looked at Maya. "You're advising him to accuse his own son? To wreck my job? For what, some emails printed by mistake? Do you get off on breaking families?" Maya didn't blink. "I advise my client to preserve evidence and protect himself," she said. "Companies investigate their own potential issues. They don't take direction from me. They know their policies and they enforce them. This is not a family matter. This is a matter of records. Your father has the right to boundaries and to be free from coercion. That's the end of my role here until I need to expand it." He turned to my daughter-in-law as if she were a jury. Her eyes went glassy with effort. She put her hand on his forearm and squeezed. He pulled his arm away and stood, the couch releasing his shape like a rubber band. The phone rang again before he could dial anyone else. This call wasn't for me. My son looked at the screen and paled. He walked down the hall to the bedroom to take it. His voice came through the thin wall, low at first, then rising and falling in waves. Words wandered out, army words, cooperate, devices, suspension, with a choked edge I hadn't heard since he didn't make the baseball team freshman year. When he came back out, he was smaller. The air around him was smaller. He looked at the recipe book like it had insulted him. "They're sending someone," he said, the words like sand. "I need to bring the laptop, the external drives, and any physical records." He swallowed. "They suspended my access." No one said anything for a moment. The refrigerator clicked and hummed to fill the space. The radiator startled and then remembered itself. The neighbor across the hall must have been leaning against her door, because when the building groaned, her place groaned too. "I'll get the box," I said, and stood. My knees surprised me with their willingness. I walked to the office and felt the air in it change when I opened the door. I pulled the top drawer, felt the stop, and slid the keyed lock with the small green tag. The lock clicked like a polite cough. I lifted out the gray lockbox and brought it to the table. It was heavier than it looked, a solid little piece of someone else's plan. I set it down. The sound it made on the wood was final. I put the key on top and pushed both toward my son. He didn't take them. He looked at the box like a confession in metal. After a long moment, he reached out and rested his fingers on the lid. His hand shook. He lifted it and set it down again and did not open it, like a man touching a casket. There was another knock, and this one had a new shape. Maya looked at me, and I stood. 2 people from the company stood outside, a woman and a man, both with lanyards that said "Security" in calm letters. They looked like people you'd see at an airport who were good at waiting. The woman introduced herself as Carla, showed her ID card without being asked, and asked if she could come in to retrieve company property. Her voice had a kindness baked into it that didn't dilute her authority.
My son went to get the laptop. He held it like a newborn he didn't want. He set it on the table next to the box. Carla looked at it and nodded.
"Thank you," she said. "And any external devices?" "The box," he said. He wouldn't look at me. "I need the key." "It's on top," I said, and stepped back. The key left a ring of clean metal in my palm where I had held it. The feeling surprised me, like a weight leaving that I had convinced myself I couldn't feel until it was gone. Carla opened the box, counted the drives without touching them more than necessary, and logged them on a clipboard that had a grid with boxes for signatures. "We'll leave you a list of what we've received," she said. "We'll return anything personal if it isn't needed." She slid the box into a padded bag and zipped it, a sound like a closing book. She and her colleague both signed the list, and then my son signed, and then she asked me to sign as a witness of transfer, and I did. Maya read the form and nodded. We were a small machine operating in my kitchen. The machine was unimaginably comforting. When they left, the apartment felt like an elevator between floors. My son sat down hard. He pressed his hands to his face. He rubbed like the gesture could erase a day. My daughter-in-law made a small sound in her throat. She moved to put a hand on his shoulder and then thought better and moved to the sink instead, washing a cup that didn't exist. Maya stood, gathering her bag. "We'll keep this simple," she said, her voice soft now. "Mr. Edward, you'll come with me to the branch to sign the final papers for your account notes. Then I'll drop you back. APS has your case open. They may call this afternoon. If they come, your neighbor will be here. Don't engage in arguments. If anyone raises a hand or a voice, call me and then call the police. If you need a place to be in a public place. Coffee shop, library, my office. Tonight we'll talk about step 2. Today you rest inside the boundaries you drew. You did a lot." "I didn't do it alone," I said. Emily's pencil stopped moving to underline that. "Most good things aren't done alone," Maya said. She shook my hand, pressed her lips together like someone who believed in something bigger than her job, and left. After the door closed, there was a silence that wasn't empty. It was the space on a blueprint you deliberately leave between supporting walls. I sat down. My son stared at nothing. My daughter-in-law dried her hands and turned, the performance gone. Her eyes were red in a way she couldn't control. She opened her mouth and something else came out than the voice she rehearses. "We were trying to help," she said, and the word "we" wobbled in the middle. I was trying. The rent, you did forget. The bills come and they pile up, and I like order. I like knowing I can get through a month without juggling. I thought I could streamline." She laughed a wrong laugh. "I used to be good at streamlining. I thought if we controlled variables, nothing bad would happen." "You controlled me," I said. "Not bitter, just naming the object. I became a variable." She swallowed and looked at Emily. Emily's face was a calm pond. My daughter-in-law looked away first. "I didn't know," she said to the counter, "about his work. I don't know anything about his work past the words he brings home." She glanced at my son, and he flinched, like a man hit by a breeze he didn't see coming. "I don't either," I said. "That's why we asked other people to look. I put my hand on the recipe book. This is the only book I know how to read without help." My son dropped his hands and stared at the table. He said into the wood, "They'll fire me." "I don't know that. I know they'll look." "What do you want from me?" he asked, and I heard a boy answer his own question across 3 decades.
"I want to be able to make soup without being hit," I said. The words were simple. They were heavy enough to stand upright on their own. I want to sign my own name on my own money. I want you to stop thinking that because someone is older, they are smaller. He inhaled, a shuddering sound, then exhaled. He nodded once, a tiny movement that might be nothing and might be the first piece of a different life falling into place. "Okay," he said, and the word didn't float, it sank.
Okay. My daughter-in-law straightened a dish towel that didn't need straightening. I can step back from the bills, she said, and looked like a woman trying on a new sweater in a mirror and wanting to like it. If that's what you want, I thought I was being a good daughter. Her eyes wet again, and this time the tears went where they wanted. She wiped them with the side of her hand fast and hard. What I want, I said, is to not be made small in my own house. You can help without owning. She nodded, ugly crying now, not the pretty crying she knows how to do. She left the room without a word, and I heard a closet door bang the way doors bang when you're trying not to bang them. I let her go, not forever, just to the place where she could find the middle distance between control and care. The doorbell rang again, near noon, a light, official ring. A woman with a canvas tote and a government badge stood there, a social worker with kind eyes and shoes made for hallways. She introduced herself, asked if she could come in, asked if I was comfortable speaking in the kitchen. She looked at my face and looked at my shoulder and wrote small, precise notes. She asked if there were any weapons in the house. I said no, unless you count words and a cast iron skillet. She asked me to describe what happened the night before. I did. She asked if I felt safe. I said I felt safer today than yesterday. She nodded, took Emily's name with care, looked at my son with a professional neutrality that has stopped fights in other kitchens, and told him plainly that any contact that looked like control around me could be a problem. She left us with a card, a case number, and a sentence that moved like a hand smoothing a bedspread. You're allowed to be old without being handled. After she left, the apartment exhaled a different breath. Emily came to stand next to me. She pressed her hip lightly against my arm the way a person leans into a rail on a boat to find the horizon. I put my hand on her head for a second, the way you press a stamp to paper to make sure the ink takes. By 2, the day settled. The neighbor knocked twice and held up a bag with lemons and a bunch of celery, like a bouquet. She said, "Soup?" and smiled without teeth. I said, "Soup." She came in, tied her hair back with a rubber band from around the bag of celery, washed her hands, and stood at the counter like a guard who knows how to peel carrots. Emily got the onions from the basket, the butter from the fridge. I opened the recipe book and propped it against the sugar jar with a wooden spoon, the page already turned to taste first. The pots gleamed when I lifted them. The kitchen felt like a kitchen, not a courtroom. I set the flame low. The butter melted with a sigh that meant winter would be bearable. I added onions, and they went from stiff to glossy, from sharp to sweet. And you can hear it when that happens. You can hear the change my wife wrote about in the margin years ago. The sizzle softened into something like whispering between friends. I added celery and carrots, the orange coins falling into the pan with cheerful quiet. Emily leaned in and said, "It sounds different." And I said, "It always does, right before it's ready." The neighbor sliced garlic thin, the knife making a rhythm I used to make when I still cut wood. My son hovered in the doorway like a man learning to be somewhere he is not the loudest thing. He smelled like the outside. He had gone for a walk and come back without buying anything. He watched the pot like it had something to tell him.
When the stock went in, the kitchen lifted, all its smells coming to meet it. I let it come up to the edge of a boil and then backed it down to a gentle lean. Emily stood on her toes and peered in. I handed her the big spoon. She stirred with care, the way you stir a memory so it doesn't break.
My daughter-in-law appeared with red eyes and a quiet face, hands empty. She set 4 bowls on the table, spaced them evenly, and then moved them a half-inch because she's herself. She took a breath and, without speaking, set a salt cellar by the stove within my reach, then took her hand away fast like she had touched a stove. I waited. I dipped the spoon. I tasted. The first sip was a whole day. It was the store broth my wife warned about. It was a little flat. I added a pinch, then another, each time tasting like the page told me to, like my wife would have insisted. The salt woke the soup without scolding it. It became itself. The sound from the pot made a satisfied little sound I had not heard in this house for too long. I turned off the flame. I ladled. The bowls steamed their soft fog. The recipe book lay open, and I let my hand rest on it a second before I moved to the table. We sat, me, Emily, the neighbor, my son, my daughter-in-law. No blessing, no speech. The spoons hit the bowls and then went quiet, because you don't clang at a table like this. The first tastes went in, the shoulders around me dropped an inch, the room got warmer in a way the thermostat can't measure. The neighbor touched my elbow once with the back of her hand, and then took it away like a flame brushes up against a log and then finds a home. My son ate slow. He kept his eyes on his bowl. When he finished, he set his spoon down and looked up. He held my eyes for the first time that day. "I'm sorry," he said. There was no flourish in it, no idea of performance. It was a plank laid over a place where there was a drop. It didn't cover the whole gap. It covered the part we had to cross today. "Me too," I said. The words found a place to sit between us, neat and simple like a folded towel. My daughter-in-law pressed her napkin flat with her palm, then folded it and unfolded it. "I'm going to stay with my sister a few days," she said, and glanced at Emily. "Let things breathe." It was a relief and a worry, both. She took her bowl to the sink, rinsed it, and set it upside down on the rack. She didn't wipe the counter. That was how I knew she was serious. "I can manage," I said, and meant it. She nodded, and I saw a woman who had been a girl who had to control to survive, trying to learn how to do a different verb. After we ate, the neighbor gathered her tote and left with a look that said, "Call me for bread or help. Doesn't matter which." Emily and I cleared the table together, the easy dance we know. My son put his hands in his pockets and took them out and put them back again. He stood at the edge of the kitchen and watched us. He opened his mouth twice and closed it twice, and then said, "I have a meeting at 4. He didn't say with who. He didn't need to. He looked at the recipe book, at my hand on it, and he nodded at the book as if it had spoken to him, or as if he wanted to say thank you and couldn't say it to me yet.
"Good luck," I said. It wasn't the right phrase. Luck had very little to do with anything. It was a phrase fathers use when they need to put something in the air that isn't heavy. He nodded again. He walked to the door, put his hand on the knob, and then took it off. He turned back and walked to me, and, without asking permission from the old rules we've been obeying for too long, put his arms around me carefully, like a man hugging the idea of his father. He did not squeeze. He did not perform. He placed his hands where a boy does when he is learning to do it again. He stepped back. His eyes were wet and not ashamed of being wet. I'll be back," he said, and left.
The apartment made the special noise it makes when a door closes and leaves truth on the inside. The radiator exhaled in relief. The refrigerator hummed in contentment. Emily leaned against me and let her head find the spot under my shoulder that knows her. I let my hand rest on her hair. It is just hair, and it is a blanket. I put my other hand on the recipe book. The cloth cover is a map back to myself. The window let in afternoon light, thin and generous. Dust floated like galaxies, where a galaxy is just flour and skin. The kitchen smelled like broth and butter and lemon, and the inside of a house that has decided it can be honest again. My cheek ached and would ache for a few more days. I didn't mind. It was a bruise doing its second job, reminding me of the line I had drawn and the line I would not let be crossed again. The letters on the sticky note with the APS number had curled a little at the corner from the steam. I pressed it down. It stuck. I pictured my wife standing by the stove the way she used to, one leg crossed at the ankle, spoon raised like a conductor, eyes narrowed when she tasted and then widened when she got it right. She would have loved this soup. She would have said, "You took your time and it paid you back." She would have touched my cheek with the warmth of her fingers and said, "You listened." I stood and washed the pot, warm water running over my hands, and I thought about the 3 simple things I had done today that made today what it was. I wrote down what happened, I told people whose jobs are to look, and I put my name on the line that belongs to me. That was the whole plan. It felt like laying a good foundation, square, true, level. Emily dried the bowls and put them away without making a show of it. She slipped the charger she had given me back into my pocket like a magic trick and smiled. The neighbor's piano on the 5th floor tried the same 3 chords and almost got a 4th. Outside, someone walked a dog who didn't want to walk. Someone else laughed on a phone about something that had nothing to do with us. The building felt like an old ship that had turned a degree toward home. I sat again and rested my hand on the book, my palm covering the word soup because I didn't need to read it anymore to know it. The kitchen held, the house held. I held. Respect isn't a favor you ask for. It's a boundary you keep. Love without respect is just ownership, and I don't belong to anyone. If you like the story, leave a like, subscribe, and write in the comments what you would do if it were with your family. Until the next story.